All right, we are going to get started this evening, just to be respectful of everyone's time who showed up right away at 6 o'clock. So good evening, I guess, on this Monday. We are going to be talking specifically about geology within the Driftless area. We have two other Zooms. We have one in February and one in March. The February one is going to be about the flora and fauna of the Driftless area. And then the March one is going to be about culture within the Driftless area. So geology kind of is where the Driftless started. So I thought that would be the best one to start off with. If you haven't gone to a program before with Dubuque County Conservation, welcome. My name is Taylor Schaefers, and I'm one of the naturalists with Dubuque County, and my office is out at the Swiss Valley Nature Center. We're going to get started right away with this. So I am a Driftless native. I grew up in Clayton County, up in the Garnaville-Guttenberg area, so very familiar with the Driftless area and the Mississippi River. I went to Loras College here in Dubuque, so that's what brought me here originally for biology education, and was then a science teacher for a little bit. And during COVID, like a lot of other people, figured out how important the outdoors was to me and wanted to make that more of a career choice for myself rather than being in four walls all the time. So I then joined Dubuque County Conservation as a naturalist. I've been there for about a year and a half. And I love exploring the Driftless area. I love exploring just anywhere in the United States. This is a picture of me over at the Aldo Leopold Shack up in Baraboo. And that's actually how I got started in the conservation field in the first place. I had an elective J term with Dana Livingston, who was a professor here at Loras College back when I was there. And we did a J term about Aldo Leopold, and it was called Signatures on the Land, about how every choice we make, whether we think it's good or not good or has no impact at all, it kind of molds what we think of the natural world around us. So that's when I first got introduced into the Mines of Spain, Swiss Valley, Dubuque County Conservation, and just conservation in general. And I fell in love with it. So before we dive too deep into what the Driftless area is, this is for anyone and everyone. This is for people who have lived in the Driftless area their entire life. This is for people who have never heard of the Driftless word. And this is for people who have heard about it, have lived here, but want to know a little more. So this is the Driftless area. We have Iowa in that big green, and the gray and the outline part of Iowa is going to be the Driftless area. And Driftless area can be a Driftless area, it can be the Driftless region, some people call it the Driftless zone, but Driftless is a big keyword of that. So it includes parts of Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. It's about 24,000 acres, or 24,000 square miles, excuse me, of land in this upper Mississippi River Valley. But before we get any farther, I know it's a little harder to gauge an audience when we are online versus in person. So just in the chat real quick, if you guys could open that up, I kind of have a scale of 0 to 3. So I want to know, based on who is zooming in today, have you never heard of the Driftless area? A 1, maybe you know a few locations, cool places. 2, you could probably tell someone not from this Driftless area some key features and stories and background about it. Or number 3, you know the story behind the word Driftless, the impacts of the ecosystems, the geology, the plants, the animals. Maybe you even know more than I do. So we have some 1s, 2s, even some 3s out there. I don't see any 0s though. Okay, so it seems like we have lots of 2s and some 3s. Okay, awesome. So as we continue on, if there are any questions, you do not have to wait until the end for those. You can hop onto the chat. I'll try to keep an eye on the chat. And if I don't see it in the chat, feel free to unmute yourself and just say, hey, Taylor, can you stop a second? I need to ask a question, whether it's for myself or for the entire group as well. So feel free to hop on and talk as needed. Or if there's anything else, I've only been in the Driftless for my life. Some of you maybe more than my life. So if I get something wrong, you're like, you need to change that, let me know right away. So let's start off with some really cool pictures. Driftless area, if you're born and raised here, you might have to leave in order to know how great the driftless area is. So this is up in Algific County. This is Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation property where I got to spend a summer interning at. And this made me fall even more in love with the driftless area. So this is the Upper Iowa River, just around thousands of acres of awesome protected land. This is a common scene in Dubuque County. This is down at Whitewater Canyon near Bernard. And I'm going to talk about some of these places and what you should go see at them to see the geology of the driftless area. This is out at the Swiss Valley Nature Preserve. This is near the Nolan Access. So this is a big, strong bur oak that we recently just cleared out around within the past year. And then this is at the prairie down at Proving Grounds during a field trip that we had. So over on this left-hand side would be the John Deere plant, and you can just barely see the pavilion right before the trees. So all awesome things that I love about the driftless area. So in order to really understand what the driftless area is, you have to rewind all the way to the beginning. You got to go back to 4.6 billion years ago when Earth just got created. So we all kind of know this area as Pangea, but it's kind of interesting when you look at all of the different countries that are mushed together and you put names on them and you put the territory lines on them. Because when you look at Pangea as one big mass, it's hard to understand where Iowa or even the United States or even North America is during that. So we can see that the United States is that really pale green color on that left-hand side. And we are going to look at the geologic time scale of everything. We're going to talk specifically about Iowa within each of these, but we're going to talk about everything right away. So we're going to start at the bottom. We have the Precambrian. Okay? This was 4.6 billion years ago. And when I use the MA on that top there, so 4,600 to 542 MA, that just means millions of years ago. So 88% of geologic time is spent in the Precambrian period. So that means 12% of time is a lot of life, a lot of new plant life, new animal life, but 88% of the Earth's history has zero to little life. So a lot of land, not much life, 4.6 billion years ago, billions of years of pretty much nothing happening. Then we travel into the Paleozoic era. So that's 542 to 250-ish million years ago. This is a time where there is a ton of marine life. There's a few vascular plants kind of getting onto the edges of the land. There's a lot of oxygen. So in the Precambrian, there wasn't a ton of oxygen, wasn't a ton of opportunity for animals and plants to even be alive, more so animals. The temperatures across the globe start to rise. They are on average over 100 degrees across the entire globe. And this is when the limestone and the dolomite are forming. So we have a ton of limestone in the area. Limestone is very calcium rich, and that calcium is actually coming from all of those organisms over thousands, over millions of years, settling to the bottom and collecting at the bottom. So when you, for example, Graf Park, I'm going to show some pictures of that. There's just, thousands upon thousands of fossils found there. So Doug, yeah, you were just asking about what time period are the fossils at the Graf outcropping from? So those are going to be from this Paleozoic era. So the Paleozoic era, Iowa is underwater. Iowa is not land. Near the end of the Paleozoic, it starts to be kind of swampy, kind of tropically. But right now, during this Paleozoic era, for millions of years, over 200 million years, it is going to be just ocean for the most part. But that's the time frame that the limestone and the dolomite.
At the Graf, where those fossils are, they said that's the Paleozoic area.
That is correct. So in Graf, you can see
the very first of marine life, oxygen-rich environment, a few
Yep.
plants. Yeah.
Yep. And then if you ever, there is the Devonian Fossil Gorge down in Iowa City area. So that is part of the Paleozoic time frame as well. We don't really have that much here in the Driftless area. We're just outside of that. But if you are looking for something cool, looking for fossils, if you head down to Iowa City and think about why Coralville is called Coralville, there are a ton of coral fossils there from this Paleozoic era, and specifically the Devonian time. So if we fast forward, and we're going through millions of years at a time, you know, flipping the page of a book and you get done ASAP. So this is a picture of Graf Park. We had a summer camp out there this past summer. We actually biked the entire Heritage Trail from Dyersville to Dubuque and stayed overnight at Graf. So we were able to take some time, walk over to the fossil area alongside the road, and kids were able to look at all of these different layers of the fossils.
Here's
So
a field trip they did with the kids at Graf.
When we're looking at these, there are going to be a lot of cephalopods, and cephalopods are similar to squid. They have these really long cylindrical, let me go to my next picture. So this is an example of a fossilized cephalopod. This is a pretty small one. Some are even smaller than your pinky. So that's my hand in reference, not a huge hand. So that's one of the smaller cephalopods, and they're just stacked haphazardly. So when a cephalopod's dying, it is going down to the bottom. It is, you know, getting shuffled with a bunch of other cephalopods, and you can just see hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds smacked together. But this is what a rendition of a cephalopod would be. There have been really big fossils found in this area. So most of them are about the size of your fingers, for example, but there have been accounts of pieces found that are a foot long, 2 feet long. I don't know if there's 3 feet long ones, but I wouldn't doubt it. These could get pretty big. But again, the really common ones are going to be the size of your fingers, probably. And in this picture, you can see the layers. So obviously over millions of years, these layers are being formed. I don't know how fast the layers are formed, but for example, soil takes, you know, hundreds of years to actually form 1 inch of soil. So just think about how long it takes to form actual rock and not just soil. So again, millions of different years, and you can see all the different layers there at Graf. If you do go here at Graf, it is kind of scary to get off of the road. So I would suggest parking at the Graf Park and then walking along the Heritage Trail and then across the road, because it is really just right off the road. But a very cool experience, whether you're looking for fossils to gather or just wanting to look at all of these cephalopods together. So after that Paleozoic era, after, you know, the ocean is there, it's really hot, starts to cool down a little bit, and there's more land animals coming to this area. There are a ton of dinosaurs. However, Iowa is still pretty much underwater and is pretty tropical. So during this Cretaceous, Jurassic, and Triassic time periods, when we had Jurassic World talking about all of these T-Rexes and Apatosauruses and all of these cool dinosaurs, we don't have that here in Iowa. There's a little bit of Western Iowa that maybe has some dinosaur fossils, but here we have a lot of sea fossils. So we didn't get any of the cool Cretaceous, Jurassic, and Triassic land dinosaurs that other countries, other areas have, for example. So when we think about dinosaurs, we think that there's this huge meteor that took out all the dinosaurs. However, when we actually look at this, there was this really big extinction between the Paleozoic and the Mesozoic eras. So this extinction isn't as well known because it's not extinction of cool, you know, weird looking dinosaurs. It's extinction of a lot of sea creatures. So it doesn't get talked about as much. So the Mesozoic, again, is about 250 million years ago to about 66 million years ago. So we just went through millions upon millions of years. And now we're going to get into the Cenozoic era. So the Cenozoic era is going to be about 66 million years ago to present day. So this is the age of mammals. This is the age of a lot of land animals, insects and birds and everything animals, migrating animals. This is the time of the Ice Age. This is a lot of time where the land is transforming because of glaciers in the Ice Age. The land is shifting. We're not in Pangea anymore. During the Cenozoic area, the land that we know as Earth today is pretty much the same throughout the Cenozoic era. Sorry, I keep saying area. But during that Ice Age, we have mammoths, we have mastodons, we have giant sloths, we have lots of glaciers, we have colder climate. And now getting into specifically the Driftless area, because we kind of had to go back, look at geology before the Driftless area was created in the first place. So this is a picture of about 1 million years ago. This is called a pre-Illinoian glacier, and it is coming down and kind of flattening out Iowa. And when I say flattening out Iowa, I don't mean flattening out like a bulldozer. So when we talk about glaciers, when someone says, oh, it flattened out the rest of Iowa, everyone thinks, oh, Iowa was full of hills and it bulldozed them over to nothingness. That's not true, because if you bulldoze something over, there would be this mountain range right in Missouri, for example, but there's not a mountain range in Missouri. So when we talk about glaciers, I want you to think about a glacier as filling in compared to flattening out. So Iowa might have had some mountains, might have had some hills compared to what it is now. And when the glaciers are coming through, I want you to envision that you have a slushy. You have a slushy that's got some pebbles and some sand and some rocks in it. And you're going to pour it onto the ground. The glacier, all of that icy stuff, is going to carry the rocks and carry that sand and that soil and whatever else it has with it. And it's going to fill in the cracks. It's not pushing the cracks away. It's not bulldozing them. It's filling in the cracks. And it's filling it in with drift. So the driftless area is called the driftless area because it doesn't have drift. So the rest of Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, they have that drift. And then this is a second glacier about 600,000 years ago. And this is going to go across Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois. This is another pre-Illinoian glacier that is coming around. And there are some mounds. So there's Blue Mound State Park, I believe it's a state park, over in Wisconsin. That is very key to this next glacier, but it's just big enough where the glaciers are pushed around it. So 250,000 years ago is the Illinoisan glacier lobe. And this one is coming mostly across all of Illinois. So all of Illinois is kind of covered up in that one. That's going to be the third one. And then the very last one, the most recent one, I should say, is the Wisconsin. So this one you can see is covering all of Wisconsin. But what's common in all of those four, and I'm going to kind of click through them so that you can see in that dotted area, that's the driftless area. So there may have been some glaciers that came into parts of the driftless area right on the edges, but they didn't completely cover the driftless area. So you can see this as a kind of side-by-side picture. So you can see how all of those glaciers are going around Iowa, and it's not one glacier going around, the driftless area. It's not one glacier going around the driftless area every single time. It's glaciers among thousands of years going around it in different ways. And that brings us to some really cool geology in this driftless area. We're going to go back to that limestone idea. So we had millions of years where Iowa was under the water. Iowa was a sea. It was full of sea creatures. it was full of dead sea creatures creating limestone and creating dolomite. So that limestone area is going to cause some really cool karst topography. It's going to create some really cool geological features that we have here that other parts of Iowa don't. And there might be some of these features in the rest of North America and around the world elsewhere. But to have all of these features concentrated in one area is kind of unique. On that top picture is an aerial image from Minnesota, and I just got that picture from Google. I went onto Google myself, didn't even have to search Fountain, Minnesota on images. And you can see in those
A lot of these places that she's referring to are places that I've been or hiked, and you've either been with me or.
Sorry. So in those farm fields, you can see where those sinkholes are. Those sinkholes are so big that they cannot be farmed. On that bottom picture, you can see where there is this large sinkhole down at Bankston. And for reference, the person standing down in there is our natural resource tech, Nick, and he is 6'3". He is a tall man. And you can tell that that sinkhole makes him look itty bitty. This is one of the biggest sinkholes that I've seen at Bankston. However, there are pretty big sinkholes out at White Pine Hollow near the Luxembourg area that I bet are a little bigger than this one. But when you think about sinkholes, sinkholes don't just magically appear. It's going to be something that takes a lot of time. Just like everything we're talking about geology, everything takes a lot of time for this. So there's going to be our rain that is just slightly acidic, and it's going to start breaking down the limestone. So we like to do programs with kids when we're talking about geology. We're talking about the rock cycle. And in order to speed it up, because you can't show geology making sinkholes and caves in real time, it just doesn't work. It's worse than watching paint dry. So we take vinegar, which is more acidic than our rain, and then we take a piece of limestone. And if you put vinegar on limestone, you can start to see that calcium carbonate bubble up a little bit. And this is just a faster way of showing the reaction of the slightly acidic rain reacting with the limestone over thousands of years later. And something to make it even faster is if you had a piece of limestone, you see that the vinegar is not working. If you take baking soda, which is calcium carbonate, right? You can see the vinegar. So if you've ever had baking soda and vinegar bubble up together, it's kind of similar to that, but again, much slower. And something else interesting about the Driftless area. So we can think about the Driftless area as an island in the Midwest. And we can think about Algific Talus slopes as an island within an island. So although the Driftless area is full of this really cool geologic features, there's full of sinkholes everywhere. There's only Algific Talus slopes on some parts of the Driftless area. So we know that there are some slopes over at Bankston Park, and there is U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service property next to it. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has property that is protected that public is not allowed to go on because they are protecting endangered species, whether it's plants or animals. Specifically near Bankston is the Pleistocene snail. And if you think back about the eras that we went through, Pleistocene was one time period, and the Pleistocene time period was during one of the ice ages. So we have what they call a relic. A relic is going to be a plant or an animal that's from the ice age time period in our examples, but is still able to survive today. So when we are looking at Algific Talus slopes, Algific just means that it's really cold air, and talus has some loose rock in it. So during the summer, warm air is going to be drawn down into the sinkholes. There's going to be some dolomite, some limestone. The rain has broken up the limestone a little bit, and then the ice is going to be there from the past winter. After that warm air comes down, the air is cooled over that ice, and then it's going to come out these vents or come out these little holes in that slope. And right where those vents are, they actually create a microenvironment where Pleistocene snails, monkshood flowers, and other species can thrive and survive in. So if you would find an Algific Talus slope and you were to hold a thermometer on a really hot day, like 90 degrees outside, you hold a thermometer at the entrance or the exit of that vent, it could be down to 40 degrees. So that air is super cooled with the ice below and then comes out to create that microenvironment. It's kind of like nature's air conditioning. And then during the winter, the cold air is actually getting drawn in, and then the cold air is flowing over that water and turning it into ice. And then it's going to stay ice for a while during that summer as well. And if you want to learn more about the Pleistocene snail, that's going to be the February one. So I don't want to give too much away about the cool plants and animals that we have in this area. But there are U.S. Fish and Wildlife properties all along the Driftless area. So I know that there are some up in Clayton County, Dubuque County, and I'm sure there's some over in Wisconsin and Minnesota, maybe even Illinois as well. Another way that our geology is kind of cool is that when the water is breaking away that limestone, it's really easy to create underground rivers, underground waterways, and then create a cave. So the picture on the left is a cave at Whitewater Canyon. Caves are really cool during the summer, but they are even more magnificent in the winter. So that picture is taken during February when there's a little freeze thaw, and the water is dripping down from the cave ceiling and is freezing on contact to the cave floor, kind of creating those upside down icicles that kind of look gooey, ghosty. But these ones are a little smaller. I've had them up to my hip, so they can grow 2, 3, I haven't seen 4-foot ones, but at least 3 foot tall icicles in the caves. The top right picture is another cave that you can stand up in at Whitewater Canyon. And then this summer, we also had a different caving camp where we took kids to Whitewater Canyon. They were able to crawl on their hands and knees, get into the cave as far as they wanted to. But then we wanted to make sure that we had, a more enjoyable experience for those who are claustrophobic, for example. We went down to Crystal Lake Cave, and that bottom right-hand picture is Crystal Lake Cave, where they have a little cave system that you can actually walk through. There is a really cool cave system up in Winnebago County, Coldwater Creek, and there are 16 miles of underground river in this cave up in Winnebago County. And I'm going to talk more about that and how I know all that in a little bit. So when we think about all of these sinkholes, obviously the water is going down into the ground, it's breaking the limestone, the ground on top is falling in, but then where does the water go? Oh, the water makes a cave, makes an underground river, underground waterway, but then where does it go? It might go down into the aquifer. Otherwise, in a lot of sinkholes, if there is a slope nearby, that water is going to come out as a cold water stream. So here are examples of the Little Macokota River, and then the one on the right is at White Pine Hollow. So these are both cold water streams. So that water is going down into the limestone, it's getting cooled by the rock, and is coming out as really cold spring water. Cold water streams make it possible for the Driftless area to be able to have trout in it. We have the Burt trout, which is the only native trout to this area. And then the Iowa DNR actually stocks the rainbow trout and brown trout for people to catch in certain waterways. So some trout streams that we have in Dubuque County include Catfish Creek over at Swiss Valley, and then the Little Macokota River, which is up at Bankston. If you've never tried trout fishing, would highly recommend. It's a little different than other types of fishing in the area. And if you're really looking for a challenge, fly fishing adds another step of challenge to your trout adventures as well. But trout need really clean and really cold water. Trout are not able to live in water that's over 70 degrees, and that's kind of on the high end as well. So trout really like that 50 degree, 60 degree water temperature, especially during the summer. So that 70 degrees, that is the hottest water of like all of summer. So it's not like 70 degrees in the winter. That's 70 degrees that trout can survive in the summer. So for example, when trout are stocked, they have to go through a, what's the word that I want? Where if they go from really cold to really hot or really hot to really cold, they're going to get shocked. So the trout that we have, for example, up at Swiss Valley in the Nature Center, in order to acclimate those to the trout tank that we have, they come in a really super cool water, and our water in the tank is just a little warmer. So we have to acclimate them first in order for them not to get shocked and die. And they do the same thing for stocking the trout streams in Northeast Iowa. So now this really cool video that I've seen before, and hopefully if you are a 3-person from earlier, you know a ton about the Driftless. Hopefully you've been able to watch this documentary. This documentary called Decoding the Driftless is all about the Driftless area. It's about the geology of it. They go deep into sinkholes. They go to Fountain, Minnesota. They get to go down into Coldwater Creek, that 16-mile underground river that emerges as a trout stream. They talk about the culture of indigenous people in the area. They talk about the fauna and the flora. They talk about the peregrine falcons. And you can see places that you have recognized in real life, which is really cool. So we have someone who says that you can purchase it at Riverlight's bookstore. With Decoding the Driftless, you can purchase it online to be able to view. At the Swiss Valley Nature Center, we have DVDs and flash drives, so you can watch it on a DVD player or you can watch it on a laptop. So if you're looking for a really cool video, this is a great one to watch, and you can learn a ton about it. I've probably watched this 6 different times, and I learn something new every single time I watch it. And this is actually a picture of up at Devil's Lake, just barely in the Driftless area that started the Driftless area, but they talk about Devil's Lake as well over in Wisconsin. So some really cool places to discover geology in our area. If you're someone like me, you're like, oh, great, cool. I love learning about it, but I want to experience it as well. Whitewater Canyon, I had lots of pictures from there. The caves are awesome during the winter. They're really cool during the summer as well. That is an area managed by Dubuque County Conservation, and that is near Bernard, just before you get to Cascade, right off of 151. Another cool place that many people, even locals, like they might know about it, but they haven't been there. Bankston Park is really well known by fishermen in the area, but not really well known by the whole hiking crowd. So with Bankston Park, there is one walking loop at the bottom, but in order to actually see cool parts of Bankston, you have to be willing to go off trail a little bit. White Pine Hollow is a property that the Iowa DNR manages. It is a forest and part of it is a recreational area. This one is technically a New Wine address, but it's just west of Luxembourg. There are 2 different entrances, and White Pine Hollow has no trails. So if you go to White Pine Hollow, make sure that you are going with someone who has already gone there and knows what they're doing, where they're going. Make sure if you are going alone or even with someone else that you are telling someone else where you are going, when you will be expected to be back. But after all of that, making sure that you're careful in the area. It is one of the coolest areas, especially during the winter when you can follow tracks of bobcats throughout the entire property. You can hear the gurgling water underneath the rocks before it comes out as a cold water spring. You can see some of the biggest sinkholes in your life. You can see Rock City, these huge pieces of rock that have fallen down from past caves. Really cool property to go to. And then I was showing some pictures of Graf Park. If you are really interested in the fossil side of things, you can see lots of cephalopods there, some brachiopods, gastropods, some other cool organisms that were fossilized during when Iowa used to be underwater. And then the last place is E.B. Lyons Nature Center. They have a ton of cool fossils, ton of cool galena, other types of rocks, a lot of information about geology. And then the Mines of Spain, hiking trails, you can find lots of sinkholes and you can find lots of lead mines. So something to determine a sinkhole versus a lead mine. When you're looking at a pit lead mine, someone might think that it's a sinkhole right away, but sinkholes are usually going to be bigger and more established, specifically in this area. But with a lead mine, when you're digging up a lead mine, you're gonna have dirt from digging up that lead mine piled up on the edges of it. Whereas a sinkhole, everything is falling down into it. So again, EV lines, mines of Spain are really cool areas to go to discover the geology that we have in this area. We are gonna wrap up a little early tonight. If there is anyone with questions, comments, concerns, stories, I am all about stories of cool properties that you have been. I know that I just specifically touched on Dubuque County, but if you go up to Algific County, Winneshiek, if you go over to Wyalusing Park in Wisconsin, Devil's Lake, Blue Mound, there's tons of different areas. So if you have a really cool place where you're like, oh, people need to see the geology here, this is the definition of Driftless Area, please feel free to put that in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself, ask any questions, have comments, stories. And if you're like, no, I gotta head off, feel free to email me anything or join us for the Flora and Fauna that's going to happen in February. So let's look into the chat of what we have. So Doug said that Driftless is available to stream on the internet. It's a little shorter, but it kind of gives you a taste of what decoding the Driftless is like. They are actually starting another documentary of specifically in the Midwest area. So a little more outside of the Driftless. They're doing a little more than that. And they're going to talk a lot about other recreational things to do in the Driftless, not just the history behind it. Is the presentation available to view later / again? Yes. After we are done today, I will make sure that that gets posted to our Facebook. And I'm going to try to get it posted to the Eventbrite link so that if someone missed this one, for example, and want to go to the next one, they can view what we talked about tonight. Is Macoka Caves part of the Driftless? So I'm not sure if all of Jackson County is included in the Driftless area, but the Macoka Caves, specifically that one, because it's a little on the north side of Jackson County, is included in the Driftless area. Would you talk a little bit more about the composition of karst? So I don't know much about karst specifically. From my knowledge in our area, karst topography is just the limestone and the dolomite, maybe some shale edges of it. So something that I can tell you specifically about like Bankston and Swiss Valley. So there's this plant called skunk cabbage and there's another plant called marsh marigold. So as the water is trickling through the limestone, it trickles only so far until it hits a piece of shale. And then when it hits that shale, it can't trickle through, it can't penetrate that rock any farther. So the water is actually going to come out of the side of the hill and create a hanging bog. So if you join us for a skunk cabbage hike at the end of March, that is on, it's going to be on our Facebook page pretty soon, but you'll be able to see the cool hanging bog there. Oh, this is a good one. My dad's been to Bixby State Park multiple things, but has never brought me there yet. But Bixby State Park has Algific Talus slopes, and that one is a really cool place from what I've heard. My dad always chooses the hottest day of the entire year to go there in order to check out the caves and to check out the Algific Talus slopes there. Someone says that they've seen skunk cabbage at Swiss Valley. So the skunk cabbage is going to be at the Hanging Bog Trail. So if you are kind of heading west on those trails, if you follow the woodland ecology up to the Hanging Bog, it's up there. But there's also some on the backside where the Nolan access is. We've found skunk cabbage at Bankston Park, and it's also along the Heritage Trail. If you go towards the Epworth parking lot area in between Epworth and Graf, there's a little hanging bog there as well. But if you've never seen skunk cabbage, it's this weird little plant that kind of smells bad. It's one of the first plants that pops up in the spring. Really cool, interesting one to go to. Someone says, will you be doing any day trips to White Pine Hollow in the future? We don't have any planned right now. We had tried to do a snowshoeing one last year, but there was just too much snow at that one specific point in time where people were kind of nervous about driving out to White Pine Hollow because it is on a gravel road. But we can definitely look into if there's enough community interest of doing a White Pine Hollow hiking group for sure. And probably during the spring is the best time when the nettles aren't crazy high because there's no established hiking trails there. Mark says that he's been in Coldwater Cave and had to descend 100 feet and wear wetsuits. That is awesome. I've never been in a cave where I had to have extra equipment with me. I've only explored caves at like Makokata Cave, Niagara Cave, some other ones up in Minnesota, down in Kentucky, West Virginia, but a lot of little caves here in the Northeast Iowa area.
Inside the cave, we actually had water. We just went so far downstream that the water was almost up to our neck. It was kind of spooky, actually.
Wow.
But beautiful formations, and it is on private property. So the group of naturalists had a special permission to go down there one.
Yeah, that is awesome. I wish to be in Coldwater Cave. That would be awesome.
Do it.
Is that the one where you have to go down like this? It's like in the shack and you have to go down that really scary ladder where you have no room to go down into?
Yeah, just a steel culvert, 100 feet down on a ladder. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you are listening to this and you're like, wow, that sounds kind of weird. It is part of decoding the Driftless. You can see exactly the cave that we are talking about. You can see them climbing down into it and climbing out of it and how chaotic that gets.
And I will say the only place I've ever been lost in Iowa is White Pine Hollow.
Yeah. I would definitely recommend printing off a map, looking at it ahead of time and making sure you know where you want to go to and where you want to get out at as well. But I've heard that there used to be a parking lot a little farther into it where you could drive into White Pine Hollow, park kind of in the middle of it and then hike from there. And since then, the Iowa DNR has closed off that entrance. And now you can hike from kind of that north entrance right off of Lake Road, quite a ways in on that old roadbed until you have to go off trail. But if you go on the southwest side, that is right away you are off trail. A GPS is a great idea for White Pine Hollow for sure, Doug.
Hi, I just want to mention I work really closely with the Jody's Conservation Foundation, and as a land trust, one of the properties that is managed does have algific slopes. It's not open to the public at the moment because it is a protected area, but they are on the other side of the river too.
Okay. Yeah, I've definitely heard of quite a few in Wisconsin. And I know as you get into Minnesota and down into Illinois, you're kind of on the edges of the Driftless area. But yeah, just a few islands within the island. Andra, right? Is that how you pronounce your name? Andra.
Yeah, I say Andra.
Okay. Are there any cool places in Illinois that I am missing out on that we should go to in order to discover driftless places?
So I specifically work with the Casper Creek Natural Cemetery, but the 16 acres that I manage are on the Casper Bluff Land and Water Reserve, which is right over in Galena and has pretty incredible bluffs that are primarily karst spaced looking right over the river. And that's kind of a fun way to be able to see not only the prairie restorations, but also what some of that geology looks like in a bare format and how it overlooks the river. That's pretty fun.
Cool. I'll definitely have to check that out sometime. So Doug says that there's supposed to be a lot of small caves at White Pine Hollow, but I haven't figured out exactly where they are yet. I haven't either. I haven't been to any of the caves. I've been to what they call the Cascades or the spring coming out, and I've been over to Rock City, but never the caves at White Pine Hollow. And White Pine Hollow has some of the most southern like grove of eastern white pines that are native to this area. There's a few more down in Jackson County area, but they're not as, not as many together of the eastern white pines there. So you kind of almost feel like you were dropped in Wisconsin or Michigan or Minnesota when you're at White Pine Hollow. But please feel free to put anything else in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourselves if you have any other questions or comments or stories or anything else.
Well, this is Mark Wagner. I think we're lucky to live in this area. It's a beautiful area because of the karst topography and all of the hills and valleys and great kayaking and canoeing. So I think we're pretty lucky.
And I didn't realize how cool the Driftless area was until I started exploring other areas of North in general. And you start to realize how cool the place is that you live. And what's really interesting, I feel like the word driftless, that keyword, has just recently exploded, at least for people my age. I grew up almost my entire life, have never heard of the word driftless until I got to college. Someone asked, does Bigfoot live in the driftless? I've seen lots of driftless stickers with Bigfoot, so I think Bigfoot lives in the driftless area.
Maybe. Well, the other thing that's kind of fun to watch for, I know when you're driving like west through Iowa, you don't have to go very far. Even around the Dyersville area, you start to see rounded boulders or granite, which are signs of the glacier that came through here. And we're kind of leaving the driftless area. And the same way going up into Wisconsin, you can drive for a ways and all of a sudden you start to see more of the glacial boulders and you know we're out of the driftless area. So that's something to watch for.
Yeah, and even with the rocks, if you actually look at the soil, like you go out to Western Iowa to the Luss Hills, and then you go up to the sand counties near Baraboo, even the actual soil is way different as well. So thanks for including that, Mark. So someone added, most people outside of the Driftless have never heard of it, but are avid fishermen often are familiar with it, probably because of the cold trout streams. Yep, I would agree with that. And I think I'll talk more about culture in March when I do that Zoom, but I think culture isn't just, in the past, it's not just over time. We are also building our culture right here. I know that driftless has been a huge keyword recently. I feel like I hear it every other day at work. I feel like I'm personally talking about it with friends and family who are just now learning what the driftless is. And then once you explain it to them, they're like, oh yeah, like that makes sense. That explains why the rest of Iowa is prairie and why we don't have a ton of prairies here, but we don't have a ton of just flat cornfields either. Have you ever seen the Old Water Ram, which I believe is like Ram Hollow? No, I have not. But I know that Ram Hollow is right next to White Pine Hollow, but I don't know the story behind that. Tom, do you know what it is?
Hello. So the story on the water ram is an old timer told me one time, and I went 20 years ago and hiked Ram Hollow and I found it. So there was a farm that sat up on top of this hill. I want to say it was probably about, well, a mile and a half away from Ram Hollow, the creek. And there was a spring there and it came into a pipe, a large pipe, say 6 inches. And then as it came down the hill, 4 inches and 2 inches. And that pressure coming down into a smaller pipe pushed that water all the way back up on top of the hill into the farmhouse. And I want to say the farmhouse was probably 1.5 miles away from that spring. And the remnants of that old ram I had found, that the pipes coming down the hill and stuff like that. It was kind of like, if you ever saw that movie with Clint Eastwood, Pale Rider, where out west they washed the side of the hills away, and those were water rams. They caught the water and the pressure pushed it out the hose. But there was engineering 150 years ago that we don't have anymore today.
I think they use that gold mining too to wash out some of the hills, like you say, to fan for gold. Not around here.
Why Ram Hollow is called Ram Hollow? So I was like,
Yeah,
there are no rams around here. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it was a watering ram.
Yeah, I haven't traveled over to Ram Hollow, but I'm sure it's very similar to White Pine Hollow since it's right there, obviously. But most of it's going to be over in Delaware County. So just outside county.
Yeah, probably.
Doug wanted to say that Big Springs Trout Factory up near Elkader area is a really cool place to see a true cold water spring. Yep, Elkader has got a ton of cool areas. While you're up there, if you haven't been to Motor Mill, would highly suggest going to Motor Mill. And that's got, if you go up from Dubuque towards Motor Mill area, the drive up there is 100% driftless. So you get away from the Mississippi River a little bit, and there's lots of hills, still lots of bluffs right along the Turkey River. And if you ever get the opportunity to go kayaking down at Lytle Creek, you'll see lots of bluffs there, some eastern white pines, some cool driftless area stuff too. Alrighty. Well, it kind of seems like everyone slowed down on the questions and stories. So if you are ready to go, feel free to hop off. If you want to have a story or question just a little bit at the end, feel free to stay on. I'll make sure I'm the last one on. Thank you everyone for joining us. It was an awesome night and hope to see you guys in